So my unit split away from the International Legion and embarked on another odyssey with other volunteers. Definitely Wagner was much more effective and efficient on the individual soldiers' basis than the Spetsnaz and VDV that we were fighting in Kherson. However, a lot of these issues, the lack of discipline, lack of following of basic combat procedures, lack of morale, has not significantly improved, although the overall Russian army has improved.
A warm welcome, dear strategists and hopefully numerous newcomers. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Jonas Kratzenberg, another former member of the German Bundeswehr, whose path also led him quite directly to Ukraine. Some of you might know him from previous appearances on larger channels, primarily in English, or from his highly recommended book Schützenhilfe, Covering Fire, about his experience as a member of Ukrainian volunteer forces from 2022 onwards. Dear Jonas, thank you for joining us. To begin, could you briefly outline who you are, what you were doing up until 2022, and what led you to Ukraine?
Hey, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Second of all, I have been a soldier for most of my professional life. After my time in school, I joined the German army, and I was a Panzergrenadier, mechanized infantry, as well as mechanized reconnaissance. I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2019, both in Kunduz and Mazar-e Sharif. Afterwards, I decided to become an officer's cadet, but after just 2 years of officer training, I quit the army, which was in February 2022, literally a week after the war in Ukraine broke out. So that was my situation at the beginning of the war. I was freshly out of a job. I was without a family, and I had a lot of knowledge and experience in real world combat. So I decided to use this, to put it to use, helping Ukraine, helping the Ukrainian people.
Honorably, especially when it comes to the desire to help, I and certainly many in the audience can strongly relate. There are many reasons one might join the military, but those who do so because they recognize, yes, I have these skills and the mindset to be ready to sacrifice for others and do what others can't. So when that then collides with the daily service routine, especially in the Bundeswehr, where everything often seems to be made as hard as possible, I don't think there's any burning person who can maintain that drive for more than 12 months in such conditions. So anyway, you saw an opportunity and seized it, gaining experiences that also reflect, for example, in the book Armee im Aufbruch, Army on the Move, co-authored by none other than unofficial social media division commander Marcel Bonat. These are the kinds of experiences that define what is expected of a warrior. Yet, in modern civilian society, such roles are expected to be portrayed and acted out only in cinema by much better paid individuals usually. How did your arrival on the ground unfold, and what were your initial experiences and assignments? After a while, you also moved on internally, correct?
Correct. The whole thing was an odyssey. So from things shifted every day, meeting places, doctrines, requirements of the International Legion of Ukraine changed literally between the time of me getting into my car to me arriving in Ukraine. And this chaos stayed pretty much with me throughout the entire war. So at first I was inducted into the International Legion under the Ukrainian General Intelligence, GUR. And I was deployed to Kiev after a couple of weeks of sitting around in Kiev during the siege in March. I decided to take matters in my own hands, went to my commander and said, here, I have a group of people who are burning to fight. Let us see some action. So next day we deployed to Irpin, which was right on the front line, freshly liberated from the Russians and right across the Bucha River to the Russian positions in Bucha. We set up camp there, we set up a listening post, and we quickly came under Russian fire. Three nights and 2 days of continued Russian howitzer barrage. Thankfully, everyone made it out, and after which we were supposed to redeploy back to base. However, again, things changed midway, and we instead regrouped together with other volunteer units and the Belarusian volunteers of the Kalinowski regiment deployed to Bucha in pursuit of the Russian army. A couple days later, we actually made our way into Bucha as one of the first units of the Ukrainian army to enter the village or the town after the Russian occupation. So we, firsthand witnessed the horrors and the desolation that was there. After Bucha, we deployed back to Kiev, and from there it was again a big uncertainty. Nobody knows where it was going to go next for us. Maybe Mariupol, maybe Luhansk, Donetsk, and in the end it turned out to be Mykolaiv.
Which, for the dear audience, we will supply regarding maps, is north of the then occupied city Kherson and would have been the next line of defense.
Exactly. And defense was the name of the game at first. Later on, it turned into an offensive action towards Kherson. However, at that point, I'd already left the Legion. We were very disillusioned with the way things were being run in the Legion. A lack of combat action for us, and a lack of accountability and responsibility from the side of our commanders. So my unit split away from the International Legion and embarked on another odyssey with other volunteers to ultimately end up in the ZSU, in the regular Ukrainian army, as part of an intelligence attacking group inside the 59th Mechanized Brigade.
And that was when you were wounded near Kherson.
Exactly. It went straight back for us to Mykolaiv, and we partook in the Kherson offensive for many months until finally in November, during the final assault, the final liberation of Kherson, I was struck by a grenade dropped from a drone that ended my military career for good.
For now, we are glad that you didn't take more permanent damage so far, and we will come back to the drone regarding questions. Particularly that the Russians didn't even have posted guards were very shocking to everyone, I believe, when we heard about regarding counter-offensives. But since then, combat has largely shifted into a phase of consolidation through artillery barrages, with Ukraine increasingly falling behind despite all the drone technology and due to lack of deliveries from Western countries. What were your personal experiences with Isu-Status drones, apart from the obviously stated so far, both using and countering them? Because I think it was still very much the time of the bigger Bayraktars and everything. So do you think your experiences in Kherson were unique due to the enemy's unpreparedness, or did similar conditions present themselves again, for example, during the Kursk offensive, assuming you have some insight from former comrades?
So my observations mostly regarding the quality of Russian troops, the complete lack of discipline and basic procedures of maintaining combat effectiveness. Things like posting a guard, not sleeping on the zero line, or at least one person in a group not sleeping on the zero line, not letting a Humvee sneak up on your position 3 times in a single week. Yes, stuff like this. And from what I can tell, it has improved somewhat. Definitely, Wagner was much more effective and efficient on the individual soldiers' basis than the Spetsnaz and VDV that we were fighting in Kherson. However, a lot of these issues, the lack of discipline, lack of following of basic combat procedures, lack of morale, has not significantly improved, although the overall Russian army has improved. So the infantry tactics, especially pioneered by Wagner, drone technology, and the use of CAB and FAB, guided bombs, has definitely increased Russian combat effectiveness, even though, the soldiers still fail to follow basic tenets of self-preservation in combat.
Yeah, especially you can basically see by is there littering much around the position? Do they dispose of their regarding dugouts and everything? You can already get indicators. Are you actually facing an elite unit, which is not too likely anymore in the static defense areas, or yeah, rather some Mobics in these regards. So thank you for sharing those insights for now, especially when watching content like Sifdiv, who also served as a drone operator on the front. You could see, for example, a rather poorly camouflaged shelter for the generator that powered their combat post and especially the drone charging stations. To me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it suggests that thermally equipped drones are still thankfully rare, but that even minimal vegetation cover can make a big difference. As I'm currently planning a video series for the summer to be published from August on tactical and practical, which will also focus on defense measures, would you be willing to share your lessons learned and recommendations in detail?
Well, my lessons learned were rather grim, to be honest, because there's a lot of scenarios where there is precious little you can do. If you're on the offensive, um, you are you're a prime target. There is very little you can do about that. The basic principles of camouflage apply. They will always apply no matter the state of war. As you said, infrared and especially thermal is still kind of rare, which gives you a chance to use camouflage, to use canopies, etc. But at the same time, a good drone pilot can fly beneath the canopy, can fly inside a forest, even with fiber optic drones. You have there's procedures you can do when you're on the defensive, when you're manning a position, but if you're on the offensive, if you're on the move, and this is where most casualties happen, right? It's mainly logistics and people moving in and out of positions. That's where they strike you the most, because that's just where it is so difficult for you to even do anything, right? the your main line of defense really ends up being some kind of kinetic option, whether that be a shotgun, or if you're really lucky, maybe a airburst grenade launcher, things like this. But nothing is standardized. Nothing is really put into doctrine yet. It's very fluid, and it's very hard to react to drones as an infantryman.
Yeah, we actually came in contact, if I recall correctly, when I was commenting on the recent purchases of Sky Rangers of the German army, basically stating, hey, get some airburst on vehicles and also get something for the 40 millimeter, for example, and especially shotguns out there. And I think that was the moment we actually, connected over social media. So, Jonas, once again, thank you for your service and your insight. I'd especially like to, again, highly recommend your book, Schützenhilfe, to anyone interested. I know several people still supporting efforts at the front to this day, and I myself helped early in with evacuations, which are discussed in this corresponding video that includes some tips. That video also addresses Russian Maskirovka deception operations, which surely contributed to the fact that most analysts didn't believe the Zelensky government would survive the first month of the war. We now all live in a constant state of information warfare. For example, I've already released the episode All Propaganda Techniques in Under 8 Minutes, and another one dealing with 5th and 6th generation warfare is currently in production. I truly believe that comrades with combat experience as you, who can articulate their story, are incredibly important. You give a voice to others and help us better understand such conflicts, war, and the dystopia of the modern battlefield. In closing, we already mentioned the absolute depths of dysfunction uncovered within the Russian army. Nonetheless, my conclusion remains that Ukraine cannot win in the long term unless Western support increases or at least stays the same, whether that includes neutralizing Iran or, for example, a leadership change in China, which, due to its classification by the FSB as a potential adversary, might lead it to terminate its partnership with Russia, Although at this moment such a move would serve neither side's war economic or strategic interests, what would your recommendation be today when it comes to assessing the likely course of this war? And do you think that established media outlets have presented realistic portrayals over the past few years?
Hmm. The problem with the media on one hand is that it always has to break down a lot of the analysis for civilians, especially in Germany. You know, the civilian world is so far removed from the military world that there's always going to be something lost in translation. I wouldn't call the reporting on Ukraine dishonest in broad strokes. However, there's one gripe that I've always had, and with your framing also, and this is the framing of the conflict of Ukraine losing the conflict with for a lack of Western support. And it's absolutely true, don't get me wrong, right? But you could just as well say it is just as true to say that if Western support picks up, or if Western support remains the same, remains the level that it is right now, Ukraine will win. There is no way forward for Russia. There is no way for Russia to end this war, which means that with Western support and with a continued expenditure of manpower, Ukraine can drag this war out long enough to dictate terms to Russia. Now, if that's going to be the full reconquista of every occupied territory, it's very, very doubtful. But the West has become the kingmaker in this conflict because neither side is able to break through the current status quo, which means the West can decide to let Ukraine fall or keep Ukraine in a position where it can dictate terms to Russia, which is likely going to be the case in 2027 or 2028.
Really interesting outlooks in these regards. I mean, forecasting is always like a bet against God, and in especially in my video regarding the 2023 counteroffensive, basically projecting its failure because of lack of armored, basically any major vehicle and everything support, air defense, you name it, anything. I still look at it from the macro perspective, and that is that Russia still has a vast potential of still untouched war industries. Ukraine is numerically, in many regards, especially in the regards of population, the smaller country. So from this perspective, looked at it, if the conflict would take in a vacuum, we would definitely see Russia winning, but also as put down in my regarding video from 2023, we only will see this grind continue for now, if not some factors from some supporting side massively increase or decrease. So totally with you, it will stay a grind. I quoted Edward Ludwig in the regarding 2023 video, where he was basically saying, yeah, it will stay a grind. The thing is, are we now looking at 1914 or are we looking at 1918, was what he was saying like 2 years ago. And I think it's very interesting that you now just said, yeah, maybe in like 2 years more. The big thing is, what he was basically saying is that we will see plebiscites, elections of the people, basically where they would like to belong to, which seems still a very likely outcome. The big thing is, of course, with so many people fled, not in their usual occupation area anymore, you will always have people who might criticize such as not fair or not legitimate and everything. So we hold up for now. It will continue as it has been continuing in the last years, with steady loss of human life. And thank you very much for all these elaborations, especially regarding the media. I would like to shortly justify myself that in January of 2024 I did a short episode on underrepresented or under interpreted regarding news, which was also focusing on the US media claiming that the US DoD was leaderless because the defense secretary was undergoing a surgery and everything. And yeah, Mr. Ryan Macbeth greatly showed that, for example, the New York Times has a 0.1 staff veteran community, And when we look, for example, at 2014 or 15, when a German media outlet was reporting on a German paratrooper who went to fight for Russia in Donbass, basically the article, last words were, if the soldier took his weapons is not reported yet. And yeah, for everyone from international audience in Germany is it as well that your regarding duty weapons stay in the weapons chamber and only get issued when necessary. So just as a give a little example on these, what I am massively bothered by sometimes. Jonas, once again, thank you for your time and your service, and all the best to you, your new family, and your new home.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.